Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How are you on this Friday afternoon? Friday, December 5th, 2025. Time to get underway with another show. Time to declare the transatlantic alliance dead. You know, whatever may, come to pass today. I don't think there was any particular plan with how to proceed with this show, as always, at least up until, well, I guess there's still really no plan. But up until the last couple of minutes, it could have been anything. We could have been winging it, going in any direction. But in the last hour or so, as I caught up with events over the last few days, well, they're a little more serious than usual. And international affairs, not usually, it's not our focus. It's not something we avoid per se, unless it's super uncomfortable, in which case sometimes we do avoid it. That is true. But I don't know, lots of chatter on the international front today, and with good reason, but we'll have to rely on the opinion of experts to try and make some sense of it here, because we don't have any in-house, but we can read, and that's good news, and that's kind of what we do on the show, so that's probably where we'll spend our time today. Instapaper could take us in any one of 10,000 directions, and there's lots of little smaller stories, too, that are of interest that you really should know about, I think, heading into the weekend, or really ever. Plus, of course, no, we haven't resolved what we're going to do, if anything, about the fact that we are learning piece by piece and minute by minute as more people react, the seriousness of the criminality behind the attacks in the Caribbean. And I guess, as expected, there are, in fact, Republican members of Congress, now that Intelligence and Armed Services Committee members have had a chance to see the video of the first attack. And I mean, I guess it's really also the first one to become this controversial. And we should remind everybody, as we have to every time, and I see lots of writers taking time out to do this, reminding everyone that the September 2nd attack was illegal from the beginning. The first missile is no more, or for that matter, less legal than the follow-up strike. But everybody's focused on this follow-up strike because it was literally the textbook example of don't do this. All right, gotcha. Let's go ahead and do this. So there were excuses offered for why this, that is, firing on shipwrecked soldiers, enemy combatants, according to the administration, but according to most other people, maybe just fishermen, I don't know, but firing on them once they are, well, as Greg was bringing up, I guess the French term for it, or do they say hors de combat, out of combat. Right? Don't ask me to speak like international law French ever, really. I just don't know it. But if they're removed from combat, you can't fire upon them. And the thing here is they were never in combat to begin with. And as George Will's turn of phrase told us, we're in a situation where we're committing war crimes without a war. I guess it doesn't matter anymore. You can just go straight to the war crimes. And you always could. But this is only one of 20-something strikes like this, all of which are equally, really impermissible and illegal. There's no war going on, declared or otherwise. It's not really within the presidential purview. It was never meant to be within the presidential purview to simply declare anyone he doesn't like to be not only terrorists, but enemy combatants as well. And we're totally in a war, even though no one else thinks so. But at any rate, yes, there are Republicans in Congress who have seen the same tape that Democratic members of Congress are coming out and saying this is the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. Yesterday, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth this is now 2 days ago, said that, well, there was a fog of war. I couldn't tell whether there was any survivors or not. It was hard to see. But apparently everyone who looked said, no, it was pretty easy to see. And also that's not what the fog of war means. But it's not the actual, obscuring of the line of sight that sometimes happens during combat. But anyway, mental confusion about what to do, whether to do it, the morality of doing it, the fast-moving pace of things, the scale of the operations, the stakes. You get the idea. I think you might actually know or have some idea what the fog of war is, but not this. This is just the fog up of war, apparently. This is the fog in my head after waking up after a whiskey bender and finding myself to be Secretary of Defense at the same time. Anyway, he said the people weren't visible. They were. The Democrats who view this is a problem, but this is the problem with everything, but now applied to the scale of, global conflict. Democrats say, I watched the videotape. I saw the people. They looked like they were desperately clinging to the only floating thing in the area. It didn't look like they were making any attempt to re-enter combat, which they were never in the first place because it didn't exist in the first place. And Republicans watched it and said, they were armed to the teeth. They were terrorists. They were holding nuclear bombs. Tom Cotton said he saw two people trying to re-enter the fight by turning their boat back over. They were clinging to a portion of a capsized hull of the boat. What I saw was two people trying to turn it back over so they could recover the drugs and continue their mission and enter the fight. And I mean, if I recall correctly, someone else described the fact that 41 minutes, I believe, elapsed between the first strike and the second, which is a considerable amount of time to be pondering, the fate of these people. Well, what are they doing? But if you've been trying for 41 minutes to turn a piece of boat over and you can't, even if there was a fight and you wanted to re-enter it, at the 40-minute mark, I'm willing to say, you're out. It's not happening. I mean, this is really going to be problematic for the Navy commanders, and I think obviously should be for Hegseth too, but I guess they're for the moment they're attempting to protect Hegseth and hinting that they'll throw the Navy guys under the bus. But for the moment, they're also trying to protect the Navy guys. So lots happening. Today being Friday, I mentioned yesterday, it is also the deadline for the so-called Department of Justice, DOJ, which we now call the DOJK, just kidding, to provide a briefing, the bipartisan, which you know what that means, and bicameral, you also know what that means, but Greg spent some time on it yesterday explaining it to you in case you didn't. Although there's an interesting etymological fact behind that, and we should bring that up. But a bicameral, bipartisan briefing by DOJ on how they're doing over there at DOJ with the process of getting the Epstein files. You remember the Epstein files, right? Every time I say the Epstein files, you should now say dramatic music follows. But just so that people don't lose the sense of urgency about that. But we're past the halfway mark of the 30 days following the enactment of the bill that the DOJ has as its deadline for the release. That would be December 19th, as I mentioned yesterday. We're just past the halfway mark. Today's the day for the briefing. We'll see whether they missed that first deadline on this or not. And I don't know whether it matters whether they missed the first deadline. The deadline everyone's worried about is the December 19th one. And I promise they'll probably screw that one up too in some way. But I always do put it in scare quotes, the quote-unquote release of the quote-unquote Epstein files. All they really have to do is put some papers on a table somewhere and say, that's the Epstein files. Now, it may turn out not to be the Epstein files or an adulterated Epstein files or just a bunch of paper that says Epstein all over it or blank pages as they once did. So, and then we have to spend a news cycle saying, hey, this isn't in compliance with the law. What are we going to do about it? And by the way, we'll also have to listen to Republicans who say, I reviewed the material. That's the Epstein files. Could be blank paper. It's lorem ipsum over and over again. But nope, to me, they're the Epstein files. So this is all entirely possible. Let me stick to the action in the Caribbean, actions, several of them, just to kind of give you a catch up of what we're reading this morning, and maybe rather than going first to the papers, let me go. We might as well just go right to it with Greg Sargent, who writes under the headline over at the New Republic: Hegseth defense collapses as Dems reveal horrific video strike details. If there was room for it in the headline, you would say, as Republicans deny that any of those details exist and insist that they actually are super incriminating for the Venezuelans. The ranking Democrat of the House Armed Services Committee tells TNR after watching the video, "This is a big, big problem." That's the quote that we use for the subheader here. Again, it's Greg Sargent, and it's going to be good, right? Members of Congress were just permitted to view the video of the second boat bombing strike that's consuming Washington in controversy during a classified briefing with Admiral Frank Bradley, who oversaw the operation. And by the way, so good, he made his appearance on Capitol Hill. That's nice. Right away, we have to stop and do analysis. And I've been thinking, by the way, that maybe it's time to start. Everybody's pushing pivot to video. I don't want to, but I do see that one of the more popular TikTok styles out there it might be compatible with the situation we have here, where you don't really have to look at where are they filming in their car, in their house, whatever. But I see a lot of times people will put up, first of all, they put up the fake backgrounds, like you might in a Zoom meeting or something like that. But they make the background the article that they're talking about. And it's sort of semi-reminiscent of the olden days of news, broadcast news, where they would have that window behind them of displaying some graphic to go along with the story. It's a little messier, but apparently everybody likes that format, that messy format. So it might be time to do these things. And this is the way. This would help tremendously as we read through our articles and lose our place over and over again. Oh, that reminds me that I did want to say something about the etymological issue with bicameral. Remember, and Greg's joke was, it's not a camera. Don't get confused. Somebody said it was a camera, and Chuck Schumer pushed past him on his way to get there to make comments. And that's an old Washington joke, and I'm sure it's been applied to more people than just Chuck Schumer. Although he's been around a long time. I've always heard it with relation to Chuck Schumer. But the old joke is, the joke construction is what's old. Most dangerous place in Washington, D.C. is between Chuck Schumer and a camera. Right, okay. Very funny. But I got to thinking about it. Well, don't confuse it. It's not a camera. But it is. Etymologically speaking, right? A camera, I guess, is what. I guess if you look it up, what is it? Latin? Chamber? Is it chamber? Because or room or box or something along those lines. Because it got me thinking about it. Remember, every once in a while, we'll hear about a judicial in-camera review, meaning in a closed out. It's outside of the courtroom. It's in chambers, the judge's chambers, in camera. And I do remember somewhere along the line having, hearing some instruction about optics and the original cameras, the first photography, that they were called cameras because they are, in fact, little boxes, little chambers where the light only enters through the lens, and then the paper on which the film on which the image is captured is at the back of the chamber, and the whole works. But pointing out that, etymologically, that comes from it. So there's how many chambers of Congress, right? Every once in a while we use that word for too. The House and the Senate, it's not a bi-chamber thing. It's bicameral because camera, the chambers, right? Okay, so there's an etymological reason why bicameral sounds like camera, not just to Chuck Schumer. Okay. So there's your etymological minute for today. It took me 5 minutes. And now I need to tell you about the wars that aren't wars that we're fighting that could get us in trouble with the rest of the world. members of Congress, who are in fact bicameral and they sit in one camera or another, were just permitted to view the video from a camera, by the way, which no longer has to be a chamber because of digital photography, etc. View the video of the second boat bombing strike that's consuming Washington in controversy during a classified briefing. There was where I wanted to stop after all these other side things to say. It is so interesting that the Defense Department rushes and the White House rush as to put out these videos of cool death stuff, which I guess others are describing, and I guess accurately, as snuff films, because that's what's happening. But they put those out immediately. Look at what we did. They're so proud of themselves for blowing up these boats, which all depends, of course, on everybody believing that they're full of drugs. And because there's been no actual evidence that they are full of drugs, one portion of the populace is saying, holy cow, aren't we supposed to have some kind of evidence that this is correct? And the other is saying, the guy said drugs. That guy is actually from the north. He's got a southern accent because his parents were from the south, but they've moved north and they are PhD physicists. So I don't want any assumptions made about that guy. Anyway, the point is that they love showing this video. They can't wait to show this video. What's strange is that they've never shown anybody the second strike, which they're super proud of because they totally killed the bad guys. If you listen to what their reaction is from the closed briefing. But isn't it odd that 20 times they've been like 10 seconds later, look, here's us killing the guys. All right. Can I see the one from September 2nd where you missed the two guys, but then you went back and killed them because of how bad they are? Oh, no, that's classified. I mean, why is it classified? I thought it was super awesome and heroic and patriotic. Oh, it is. It's just the secret kind. I mean, does that not end the game for you? All right. Well, maybe not, because you want evidence. Well, okay, so they showed the evidence to members of Congress. And guess what happened? The Democrats said what they saw anyway was deeply unnerving, although it doesn't say it here that way. It just says what they saw was deeply unnerving. And Greg is right. What they saw was deeply unnerving. One half of the bipartisan, bicameral group lied about it, and the other ones said, no, it's deeply unnerving. And it pushes Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's story closer to collapse. Representative Adam Smith, ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, said in an interview that the video of the second strike, which none of us get to see, which killed two men who'd been clinging to the wreckage of a boat destroyed in an earlier strike, which they showed us within minutes, right, badly undermines Hegseth's stance in this scandal. This did not reduce my concerns at all, or anyone else's. He says, speaking for the people who later came out and said, this did reduce my concerns. They're gone. I'm a Republican. Well, that's what Smith told Greg. This is a big, big problem, and we need a full investigation. Smith said the video shows two men sitting without shirts, not only without a boat, but without shirts, atop a portion of a capsized boat that was still above water. That portion, Smith said, could barely have fit 4 people. It didn't have to. There were only 2 alive. It looks like 2 classically shipwrecked people. That was an interesting construction. Classically shipwrecked, like a cartoon. Bugs Bunny, these guys would be sitting on the piece of floating hull. No shirts. Now, this is interesting, right? They're going to re-enter the fight. Right? Remember at one point, like during the beginning of the week, they were radioing for help or what. They didn't have shirts, right? Where's the radio? It's hiding in his shirt. Can't you see? Well, I don't know. They're pretty wet. It's clingy. I don't see anything that looks like a radio. In fact, no shirts at all. Well, then they're in their pants. Right. All right. It looks like 2 classically shipwrecked people, Smith told me, but in the briefing, lawmakers were told that, quote, it was judged that these 2 people were capable of returning to the fight, Smith added. Keeping in mind that there was no fight, you might be able to hint now that somebody in a similar situation was understood that there was a fight going on. It's one-sided. There's no fight coming back. And so it's a bad definition of fight. But on September 2nd, during this first strike, there was nothing happening. There was no fight. The Republicans in this think, well, the fight began in 1897 when they discovered how to make cocaine and started to think about bringing it to the United States. But at first they did because it was cool and it was medicine and we made Coca-Cola out of it and people were doing it at parties in high society. Now, of course, people are in fact doing it at parties in high society, but it's very, very bad. But it's okay if they're rich and they do it because they'll probably get pardoned. But even if they don't, it's fashionable. But if they're poor, it's gross and we need to arrest them. You get the idea. Anyway, no, the fight, there is no fight. But they keep bringing that word up and saying, well, they were going to return to the fight. There wasn't any fight to return to. There was never one to begin with. The only fight was the Navy dropping bombs out of the clear blue sky on these guys. And there's no returning to that. These guys don't have cruise missiles, fighter planes, anti-aircraft missiles, guns, rocks, slingshots, pea shooters, shirts, like nothing. Okay, I was going to wad up my shirt and throw it at the next drone that came along, but I lost my shirt. Okay, so Smith goes on to say he called it a highly questionable decision that these two people on that obviously incapacitated vessel were still in any kind of fight. Well, and they weren't even in the American version of the fight. For 40 minutes, they were just floating around. There was nothing else going on. There was no more fighting even from us at that point. Lawmakers pressed Bradley for, quote, a considerable period of time on the obviously incapacitated nature of the two men, Smith says, and the response was deeply unnerving. Probably amount to so what. But the broader assumption that they were operating off of was that the drugs could still conceivably be on that boat, even though you do not see them. You could not see them, Smith said, and it was still conceivable that these two people were going to continue on their mission of transmitting those drugs. Again, well, if they can be classically shipwrecked in the cartoon sense, then they also could be in the comic book sense, clawing their way somehow across the ocean. It must complete drug run. Love cocaine so much. I mean, it's ridiculous to think about, but there you have it. And of course, the idea, well, the boat's capsized. The drugs could still be in there. In fact, the whole thing is floating. I did see somebody say, well, the reason it's floating is because it's still full of drugs. Like, I don't know that like drugs float. Sometimes they wash ashore. I hear stories about that. But I mean, I don't know. If it's cocaine, I assume, I'm just thinking about the powder packed tight in these wrapped bricks. I would think that would sink. But I don't think it's buoyant in the sense like, well, it'll keep a portion of a wrecked boat afloat. I think it's actually evidence that the drugs are not there, that there's an air void in the portion of the boat that they're sitting on top of. But, I'm not expert on that. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that this is what they're saying. Well, the reason it's floating is because it's full of drugs. And if it turns out that, well, if it really was full of drugs, then it would have sunk. Then that's going to look pretty dumb too. To be clear on what this means, the underlying claim by Trump and the administration is that all of the more than 80 people killed on these boats are waging war against the United States. By the way, terrible war. They've never even bothered to approach the United States. They've not fired a shot at the United States or American armed forces. There's no opportunity to do so, and they keep heading to another country. But other than that, it's very war-y. Wouldn't you agree? They are, in the definition of the administration, narco-terrorists, in this designation. But this very idea that these people are engaged in armed conflict with our country is itself broadly dismissed by most legal experts. They should be subject to police action, these experts say, but not summary military execution. And Trump has effectively granted himself the power to execute civilians in international waters. He's a pirate. He's a pirate. I mean, he's not stealing drugs. I think. I mean, I guess we don't know. We don't know what happens to the drugs in any of these things. I don't think anybody sees any drugs anywhere. But if there are drugs and then they're disappearing, then maybe he's a pirate in a more classical sense. If they can be classically shipwrecked, he can be a classic pirate. He certainly gives no quarter. By the way, I'll also remind everybody that this first strike was the one that killed the boat with 11 people on board. And I know I recall this, and I've mentioned this on the show before, and we might as well reiterate it and bring it back into consideration, along with the reminders that, yes, the first shot is also criminal. But I recall that in the early going, right after sinking this boat and showing the video and telling everybody there was 11 people on board, that the Trump administration authorities were telling people that the reason we suspected this was a drug boat was because of the weird number of people aboard. There were 11 people on board this small boat. This boat was very heavily manned. So it must have been a drug boat. And then in the 19 plus strikes they've conducted since that one, they've always said they've killed 2 or 3 people, or that they've wrecked the boat and 2 or 3 people were, in those cases, recovered from the water in some of those cases. But that because it was so lightly manned, they were sure that that was a drug boat. And they never really did turn around and go back and say, well, wait a second, how come a few days ago you said the reason we think it's a drug boat is that there's lots of people on board, and now you're saying actually the reason we think these other ones are drug boats is because there was barely anybody on board. And I haven't seen anybody ask them that question. Not that they would answer it or anything like that, but it's becoming increasingly common for observers who doubt these stories to say, yeah, that one was probably a boat full of migrants, which, by the way, this administration would be equally happy and proud to say, well, we murdered them because they're migrants. And that is also a war on this country. In fact, it's an invasion. So why don't they say that?
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So during the break, while I was looking out the window, by the way, it is snowing here in Northern Virginia, which is it's a little early for snow for us. Schools are closed, as a matter of fact, but schools close at the drop of a hat here. So it's going to be a long winter. Anyway, as I'm watching the snowfall and I'm realizing I said earlier, I have all these ideas about doing short videos, etc. This is the reason we don't do short videos, right? I mean, even though the truth is you can edit them, and most of those edits are pretty sloppy. They're pretty choppy videos you see mostly on TikTok, but I think about the fact that, okay, I read you the first sentence of this piece, and then I had to do 10 minutes on why camera is camera, etc. So I guess I'd edit that out of the video, but that would be the stuff I would want in the video. All right. And so I could do a video about the story and then a video about all of the footnotes to the story later. I don't know. I don't know if this is ever going to work. Anyway, plus I'd always have to have a haircut and all that kind of stuff. Do people care about that? I don't know. What about caring about the illegal murders and war crimes that are happening in the Caribbean? Sure, we can care about that. In fact, let's turn our attention back to it. Where do we leave off in this one? Trump has effectively granted himself the power to execute civilians in international waters like a pirate might, except without the flag. And the flag is really, half the fun, if you ask me. Anyway, yet here it gets even worse. The laws of war generally prohibit the killing of people who are no longer in the fight, and that's enclosed in quotes, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is there was no fight, and also because we're basically saying, please don't make us speak international law French for all of this, or de combat. I'm not even certain how I'm saying that. So in the fight is a lot better. The laws of war generally prohibit killing people who are no longer in the fight in any meaningful sense, specifically including the shipwrecked, as we mentioned a number of times. It's like right there in the book, i.e. shipwrecked people. Don't do that. Or I guess e.g. All right, more etymology needs to be brought out for that one some other day. But these lawmakers were told in the closed-door briefing that the two men were still deemed to be in the fight by virtue of the fact that there could have been still transmittable drugs in the capsized and wrecked boat, Smith says, and that those two men sitting atop the wreckage could have continued with their delivery of them. They also could have MacGyvered a nuclear weapon out of what was in the boat. But in the 40 minutes that we observed them, they weren't doing that. But we figured, well, they're just resting. But pretty soon they'll start MacGyvering. What do you say to this? The evidence that I've seen absolutely demands a further and continued investigation, Smith told me. It strains credibility. Usually when I hear strains, they go to credulity very often. But we're going with credibility on this one. It strains credibility, which is also true, to say that they were still in the fight. This badly undermines the story Hegseth has told. He has said that he did not see the two men before the second strike was ordered, suggesting both that he'd gone off to do other things, which, that's not what you're supposed to do. This is kind of the gig, right? And that the, quote, fog of war, unquote, had prevented a clear viewing of the two men. The very literal fog, apparently, which, okay, he's not a metaphorical guy, I guess. I'm metaphorically drinking this whole bottle of Jack Daniels. No, you're actually drinking it. Well, but the point is, it's like or as a metaphor. No, that would be a simile. Never mind, another show. But he considers himself an educated guy, so he'd probably try to, anyway. Obviously, he's not that well educated, but obviously what these lawmakers saw contradicts the latter suggestion, the idea of the fog of war nonsense. The two men were, in Smith's telling, very visible. So the fog of war line appears to be nonsense, and Hegseth's implication that the strike was justified due to confusion about the men's status, which is actually what the fog of war is supposed to be about, also appears to be in profound doubt. So no kind of fog is happening here. Republicans who have seen the video have insisted this was all lawful. Now, Democrats who have seen the video have insisted that this was all awful, so be careful. I know, if you're a English as a second language student, you're going to be confused. What do you mean? All lawful or all awful? You have to be careful about that. Maybe you'll want to see it in print. Senator Tom Cotton, for instance, and what a guy to go to for this one. Remember, Senator Tom Cotton is probably most infamous, controversial moment was getting his op-ed printed in the New York Times in which he said we should be springing these surprise military attacks, lethal military attacks on American civilians in American cities. Yes, let's definitely kill protesters using the military. Naturally, he's not going to be terribly upset by seeing the U.S. military used to kill civilians who aren't even Americans or whatever. I.e. not human. That's the way it works in the Republican mind. Republicans who have seen this video have insisted that it was all lawful. Senator Tom Cotton said it showed the two survivors attempting to flip a boat, quote, loaded with drugs bound for the United States. Couldn't see what it was loaded with or if it was loaded with anything, and it was not bound for the United States. I guess he would probably say, I didn't say the boat was bound for the United States if he was stuck in court about this. I said the drugs were bound for the United States, which they also weren't. As it turns out, by the way, most of the drugs, and there are sometimes, quite frequently, I guess, drugs leaving Venezuela or elsewhere and headed to Trinidad and Tobago And I guess the theory that was earlier floated was, well, they're just stopping there for a rest. The drugs are taking a nap, and then when they're fully recovered, they will swim to America. But in fact, most of the drugs that go that way are stopping there as a way station on their way to Europe or Africa. So, I don't know. I mean, again, not my area of expertise, just something I've read in passing. Seems plausible. But even if they were bound for the United States, eventually, it's still a pretty weak theory. Like, shoot them on the way to Florida, not on the way to Trinidad. But we're fighting them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here, which we wouldn't because we're not fighting them over here. And not even when they actually bring the drugs are we fighting them over here. We're letting them go. Anyway, the military officials stressed in the briefing that Hegseth never directly ordered them to, quote, kill them all, meaning all the people on board, something that was implied by Washington Post reporting, and then Hegseth denied to Trump, please don't fire me. Not that that would get you fired. And they confirmed that Hegseth didn't give the direct order for the second strike, Smith says, but they did say that Hegseth's declared mission was to kill all 11 people, Smith notes. It was destroy the drugs, kill all 11 people on board. Smith told me it is not that inaccurate to say that the rules of engagement from Hegseth were kill all 11 people on that boat. And so by all indications, that second strike appears to have been ordered to comply with Hegseth's command. By the way, just to take a moment here, it's a very fine line. And it's so fine, I'm not sure it's a line. But I see what they're getting at, right? Well, sir, we've spotted this boat. It's, intelligence says it's full of drugs. I don't know, whatever you have to say. We should destroy it and keeping with our new policy. Really? Okay, we should just shoot down there. There's a lot of people on board. There's 11 by our count, which means, of course, that you can see people very clearly with the video that we've got. But okay, there's 11 people on board. What should we do? It doesn't matter. We got to sink that boat. Even if we kill everybody, you could see it developing this way. I don't think they care enough to ask these questions this way, but even if we kill all 11 people on board by doing this, I mean, if we shoot it with a missile that will destroy the drugs, it will probably kill everybody on board. Doesn't matter. The primary mission, destroy that boat, destroy those drugs. If the people are killed, as it's collateral damage. Like, I could see it developing that way and then say, all right, so you're saying that we should just go ahead with it. And the consequences to the people be damned. And he could say, look, I'm saying that if all 11 people on that boat have to be killed, I am fine with that. And that gets misunderstood as kill everybody. Or it could be just like, I don't want any witnesses. I don't want any people remaining. Those guys are just, if we leave them there, they're just going to go back to Venezuela and get another boat and get some more drugs. Better that we kill them now. But it's not a direct order to absolutely execute everybody in the area necessarily, but it could be misinterpreted. So, okay, right? I say so okay only by way of saying, okay, that might have happened. And it might have happened that way. That doesn't excuse it, doesn't explain it, doesn't get you off the hook, doesn't make it not a crime, not a war crime, whatever. I'm just saying it could have happened that way. It could have been interpreted one way by some person and another way by another person. Two people both saying, well, they're both war crimes. I mean, in this case, obviously, there's a third person there saying, no, this is fine. There may even be a lot of people there thinking it's fine. But what I'm saying is, even if both people agree it's a war crime, I believe it happened this way. I believe it happened that way. Same crime, doesn't matter in the end, but you saw this, you saw that. There's confusion. That confusion, that's the fog of war. That's what they mean, as I understand it, by the fog of war. Not there could be, smoke or actual fog or condensation of some kind that's on the camera lens. It's not that. Somebody, jumped up onto the camera and went on it. See, fog of war. No. But even if he was going, not because he wanted to obscure the camera, but because he was so exhausted from the war that he was waging, the fight that he was in, that's not the fog of war. The fog of war is, in a situation like this, there's often differing perceptions about what's happening and what would be the correct course of action, and it's very difficult to know what's going on. And sometimes a moral agent trying to be moral acts immorally upon further reflection, but at the time they thought they were doing something within the bounds of morality. But the fog of war is such that sometimes you can't tell the difference. I always thought that's what it was all about. At least what I gleaned from the documentary by that name, Fog of War. Anyway, so let's continue on. We should push on. I know this is a very big subject, so it's okay to spend this much time on it if you ask me, but there are other views of this thing. Smith did confirm that he is, quote, somewhat satisfied. It's like he's taking a consumer survey. I'm somewhat satisfied by the intelligence that I saw that the boat originally did have drugs on it. Okay, that seems important. I'm not certain why that is, but I guess it's fair to say I'd be willing to hear him out on that. He saw something from the intelligence side that says, okay, that boat did have drugs on it. But again, the idea that any of these people, even if they were trafficking drugs, are in the fight in the sense of waging war against the United States is already indefensible to begin with. They have an unbelievably broad definition of what the fight is, Smith said. And in that context, the order to kill all 11 people on the boat, no matter what, looks even worse. It's bad. That's the quote. Another Democrat, Representative Jim Himes, seconds this interpretation. You have two individuals in clear distress without any means of locomotion with a destroyed vessel who were killed by the United States. Okay? By the way, you also have 9 others that had no idea what was going on. And again, going back to the fact that there were 11 people on board, and that is anomalous in the context of all the other boats that we've hit, my guess is that there was perhaps a mix of activity on this boat. There may have been, 9 or 8, 9 of them may have been migrants saying, just, I'll pay you $100 to get me to Trinidad. I want to get out of Venezuela. And the next boat out was a drug boat. And they're like, hey, we got room. And if we have 11 people in there, they won't think we're drug runners, because what kind of drug running boat carries people instead of drugs? I mean, it's not instead of, but I mean, if I can put, I don't know, we need units and I don't have them. If I could put 100 drugs on this boat, I don't know whether you can put kilos, whatever that may be. I understand what kilograms are, but or whatever unit. I'm not a drug smuggling guy. So we're sounding purposefully unsophisticated here. If I have a boat, then I'm an economist teaching this class. If my boat carries 100 drugs, but I am also carrying migrants, presumably they are taking up some space for drugs. So I'm going to have 100 minus X drugs on board, right? And X is larger, the larger the number of people on the boat, which is why most of the boats that got sunk have 2 or 3 people on it. You need one person to steer the boat, one person presumably to, push off of the dock and stuff like that, and another person to babysit the drugs and tell it stories to keep it occupied. They all do drug mad libs on the way because it's bored. Are we there yet? The drugs are constantly like, are we there yet? And if the question is, are we in the United States yet? The answer is no, we're very far away. Anyway, don't make me turn this boat around just because there's a missile headed for us. It doesn't matter. It's a hypersonic missile. I turn around and we're just going to hit in the back. Don't worry about it. Anyway, honestly, it's insane, the whole thing. So here we are, once again, talking about the second strike when we should be talking about all of the strikes, and not just this boat, all the boats, but this one in particular, because the 11 people on board, it's amazing that the intelligence wasn't better on this, but not surprising because intelligence gets manipulated. Back to the story. Importantly, Smith told me that he and others urged military officials to release the video. That would be helpful. And why are we having to urge them? They released every other video without our asking. I think that video should be public, Smith said, adding that he also wants to see the much discussed legal memo supposedly authorizing the strikes released as well. But the military officials said public release isn't their call, so now the pressure should intensify on Trump and Hegseth to authorize release of both. I can believe that the military guys might not be authorized to release them on their own. There's also been some in fact, as a matter of fact, normally releasing video of the killing of enemy combatants, even if they are in fact enemy combatants, but certainly civilians, this would apply to, that would itself also be a war crime. So that's an interesting question for you. Suppose you were authorized to release this video, would you? Or would you say that the laws of combat prevent you from doing so? That's an interesting question to ask them, if I understand that rule correctly. Anyway, there's also been some discussion of radio communications that the two men may have sent for help. The idea is supposed to be that if they could get assistance and they could get back, quote, in the fight, meaning they were legit targets. But Smith said the officials confirmed to lawmakers they have no recording of these communications. Because a couple of days ago they said, oh, we intercepted communications of them calling for help, which I think might not, well, apparently is not actually true. And it might be like, well, I don't know if there's no sound on these videos, is there? But I guess a drone could conceivably pick up a recording of people going, help, help. But of course, it would have been in Spanish. So, Anyway, no, this piece, apparently there's no such thing. No recording, certainly, of the communications, which you would think you would have. So this piece of support for the Hegseth-Trump stance may not really exist. Brian Finucane, I think we've run into this name before and not known how to pronounce it. Finucane, a former State Department lawyer, says the entire operation is illegal, but that a full investigation could establish more clearly whether this particular strike deliberately targeted the men or just targeted the boat. From what we're learning from Smith and others now, it seems clearly like the former, the people, not the boat. Based on a description of lawmakers, it does sound as if the men were shipwrecked and targeting them would be a war crime, Finucane told me. It sounds like the men were the target. He said the stories being told by Hegseth and others are now falling apart. None of these narratives withstand scrutiny. Holy cow. Well, that sucks. I have a Washington Post piece on the same topic, but I don't know that we're going to reveal anything new from it. But, be aware that all the major papers are covering it. Video shows second strike hit before survivors could flip boat, lawmakers say. And this one, I think, might go a little bit more in depth into Tom Cotton's ridiculous attempt to justify the strike. Just keep in mind, he wanted to do this in the United States, killing American civilians a long time ago. Meanwhile, I guess maybe we'll get to the smaller stories just for a moment, and then we can spend, I guess, hour two on another major international development. But I think fittingly, you should also know that some other activities going on in Washington, D.C. today include the FIFA World Cup draw event. This, I guess, is the event in which all the participating countries are thrown in a pool, and I don't mean actually thrown in a pool, although that would be a great idea. And but anyway, they separate them out into the competition pools, right? These, what is it, like 6, 8 countries will all play one another, and then the winners, and I don't know how these stupid things work, runners up. Anyway, some number of teams from this preliminary competition move on to the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and then what comes after that? You get blown up by the United States and on the Caribbean. But there's a whole system to this. But there's a new feature that they're bringing out, and it's not like a new rule about kickoffs or everybody's going to be allowed to wear helmets and tackle each other, something fun and exciting like that one. Weapons allowed on the field. This is completely separate from the soccer, which others call football, as it turns out, most of the world. This is a new bit, and I think it's fitting for this activity. So because the United States is hosting the World Cup, although, again, Do I recall correctly? It's sort of like North America is hosting it. And so there's like maybe some games in Mexico and some games in Canada, which makes sense because this country thinks football, soccer is dumb and we hate it. But we're hosting it because, we love money. Anyway, I don't know. And Trump loves golden things, and that's what they've got. Anyway, so we're hosting, apparently. This is a mistake. One thing about soccer is it's played by the rest of the world. And so that means a lot of people who wouldn't ordinarily be allowed in this country are going to be smuggled into this country under the disguise of being foreign soccer players, football, that whole thing. And we've got to put a stop to it. But really, this organization should be like, holy cow, actually a lot of people who are brown played this game and we really should be hosting this thing elsewhere. But we're not because we're corrupt and so is Trump, so let's go. So they're going to have the draw. But the new thing about this draw is that they're going to give a prize out for, I think the prize is for killing the most potential soccer players. That must be it because it sounds like Donald Trump is going to win it. Only they're calling this thing the FIFA Peace Prize. You remember we mentioned this the other day. Donald Trump could not convince the Nobel Committee to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. So the head of FIFA said, we'll give you a peace prize. We're a bunch of soccer players. Those guys are a bunch of, scientists and philosophers. Who cares about their prize? We'll give you ours. And they're covering it as though it's a real thing over at CNN because what else are they going to do? What is the FIFA Peace Prize and why is Donald Trump expected to win? And obviously, the FIFA Peace Prize is a load of and Donald Trump is expected to win because he most resembles a load of. How's that for an answer? Ben Church is the name of the unfortunate reporter who got assigned to this stupid story, which goes like this. As billions of fans around the world, many of whom are brown, tune in to watch the World Cup draw on Friday, they'll also have the opportunity to watch FIFA President Gianni Infantino present a new, somewhat puzzling award, which has nothing to do with soccer, which is why it's so puzzling. But also then we found out it was for peace, and when they gave it to the war guy. That is also puzzling. World Soccer's governing body announced in November that this year we'll see the introduction of the FIFA Peace Prize for reasons. I had to add that part. The new annual, this is the first annual. I love when people say, this is the first annual thing, and I'm making plans for next year. God is laughing at my plans, but I am making plans for next year also to give that Peace Prize to Donald Trump later, even though he'll be 150,000 years old when we do it. A new annual, accolade given to someone who FIFA says has taken, quote, exceptional and extraordinary actions for peace, and by doing so have united people across the world. He's actually disintegrating people across the world, but, it's a loose definition. FIFA says the award will be presented on behalf of more than 5 billion soccer fans worldwide who have no vote. But how the winner is chosen isn't exactly clear. Yes, it is. And perhaps most notably, President Donald Trump is widely rumored to be the recipient of the inaugural prize. Here is everything you need to know about the new award. Everything you need to know. Oh, my God. First of all, none of what we need to know is in this, I'm sure. And we don't really need to know anything about the award except that it's fake. It's not clear how it was decided. Yes, it is. They said the guy's name before, Gianni Infantino. That's the answer. But we haven't got proof. We have no video of him saying, I'm trying to overturn the capsized vote of this Peace Prize and get back in the fight to give it a golden trinket to Donald Trump. And yet here we are making this conclusion. When and where will it be awarded? The new prize will be awarded after the World Cup draw takes place on December 5th. So that's today. The ceremony for the award will also take place in the same venue as the draw, the, for now, John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., which, of course, board chairman Donald Trump thinks he's renamed the Donald Trump Center for the Performing Arts, not to be confused with the Donald Trump Institute for Peace, which is fairly close by. a walking distance. Well, not for Trump, it isn't, but a golf cart drive distance between the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace and the Donald J. Trump Center for Performing Arts, where they're going to be giving him the Donald J. Trump FIFA Peace Prize. They're going to name it for him because he's going to win it a lot. Right now, 100% of the time. Trump now sits as board chair of the Kennedy Center after an overhaul of the previous leadership group. Hamas style. Will Trump win the award? FIFA has remained tight-lipped over who will be bestowed the inaugural Peace Prize amid rumors it's destined for the U.S. president. Infantino certainly seems to be a huge fan of Trump, and the pair have seemingly developed a close relationship in the build-up to next year's World Cup. On several occasions, the two have been seen together, not least at Trump's inauguration and at the Sharm el-Sheikh Peace Summit earlier this year. Infantino was also a vocal supporter of Trump's bid to win the Nobel Peace Prize, an award ultimately given to Venezuela's, opposition leader who loves these strikes for some reason because of how peaceful it is, Maria Corina Machado. This may all have been a big mistake, everybody. A day before the award was announced, Infantino had taken to Instagram to say that Trump, quote, definitely deserved it. The quote is just definitely. Okay. By the way, I would have said my quote for the day is Trump definitely, quote, deserves it. Or I might even say definitely deserves, quote, it. And, see me later after class what that might be. It's perhaps not a coincidence, then, that FIFA created its own Peace Prize this year and is presenting it in Washington, D.C., just minutes from the White House. How exciting. Trump, of course, is set to attend the World Cup draw because he knows and loves soccer. Along with leaders from other co-host nations, there's the answer, Mexico and Canada. By the way, huge import fee, huge tariff on bringing your team back into the United States if they've played a game in Canada or Mexico. Not to mention the 150 bazillion% tariff on soccer balls. Current prediction from Kalshi, oh my God, I can't believe they're actually doing this, as of 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday is that Trump is 91% likely to win the award. Holy cow, Kalshi, another story. We probably won't get to that one today, but oh my God, I have to throw up. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're not getting very far, bringing you all these other stories. But Kalshi was in the news recently and actually made me think maybe I should be doing these dumb TikTok videos to critique this thing. But Kalshi is a new prediction market that's out there. And we've had prediction markets out there for a little while. This is a relatively new, I think, entrant into it. But this one, the other one's sort of the platform is the primary thing, and the betting markets that are interesting. And it's always interesting to see what to theorize about what predictive power any of these things might have. That's always been part of the theory. If economics is a science worth studying, and people are rational economic actors, and this is all questionable, then when they're betting money, they're making educated guesses about what they think the future holds, and therefore you can actually glean something interesting and useful from them that's predictive ability, because it's presumed, wrongly, I think, that people who are gambling are making educated economic choices. And of course, I mean, people can very famously become addicted to gambling and become degenerate gamblers and throw away all of their money, but they believe they're making great economic decisions. So I have questions about the predictive nature, the predictive value of these things. But Kalshi is a platform where the guy who's behind it is right out front, like in most tech companies, whereas, like things like, I don't know, whatever else, the other predictive markets, those guys are not necessarily seeking the spotlight to become, billionaire boy geniuses. I'm sure they want to be billionaires, but they could care less about the genius of it. But this one has one of the typical tech bro, thinks he's a genius guys behind it. And he was just being interviewed on a podcast somewhere that's apparently, got a high production value, but I would never watch such a thing, and I've never heard of it. But anyway, but they were asking this guy about, like, what the the whole thing was about, essentially. I'm going to have to look this one up because the guy gives a tech bro speech about what it is he thinks he's trying to do with this market. And the answer is money. He's trying to extract money from people, but he's trying to give it a high-minded purpose because it is, after all, another gambling site. And gambling is a horrible activity. It's going to ruin the world. It's already ruining the world. It's ruining everything here as we speak, which is a topic we've touched on, obliquely. But anyway, it's a garbage industry, okay? And it's problematic that people are spending time in it. Anyway, something, I'm going to put AI in it and yada, yada. The co-founder of Kalshi, it says here in this clip, the comments on the clip it's Tariq Mansour, co-founder and CEO of Kalshi, commenting on this, podcast that I never heard of, but has probably got 10 billion more viewers than we have. The co-founder of Kalshi says the long-term vision is to financialize everything and create a tradable asset out of any difference in opinion. And, maybe you really need to hear this guy actually say it, but it's very dumb. I can't even, and rather than even I guess you could just play the tape, but I can read you the transcript of the guy. They ask him, you've mentioned, I don't know, they in tech speak, they say, what the hell are you up to over there? And he's basically saying, all I'm really trying to do is, there's billions of dollars out there moving in online bets, essentially. And why gamble on who's going to score the next point when you can, in fact, gamble on important questions of world affairs and try to predict important things? And why are we going to how are we going to incentivize millions or even billions of people to place these bets such that we have enough data points to make predictions about important things? We will incentivize it with money, meaning gambling. And then he gets around to saying, well, ultimately, the long-term vision is to financialize everything and create a tradable asset out of every difference in opinion. And they all nod and say, this is really genius. By the way, the correct answer to the correct response when he says we're trying to create a tradable asset out of any difference in opinion, that's the goal. It's to create a tradable asset out of any difference of opinion, is to say, no, it isn't. And just see what he says to that, right? Well, there's a difference of opinion. I don't think that's actually your long-term vision. But like I said, he's dressing up a gambling site as a philosophically important player in world affairs. And it isn't, and it shouldn't be, and it should be illegal. And we're all going to regret making online gambling legal. I don't know it was preventable. But we could bomb the crap out of most of this stuff and kill it like drugs. But, these guys give their money to Republicans, I guess. So not because they agree with them, but in order to protect their industries. Anyway, Kalshi is the name of this stupid thing, not Kashi, which to me is a line of cereals, breakfast cereals, marketed as healthful. I don't know whether they actually are, but that's the marketing for them. Maybe some organic crap in them or something. But to like a billion more people, apparently, this is great. If the AI answer from Google is to be believed, Kashi, not Kalshi, but Kashi refers primarily to, is this right? Varanasi. Maybe I'm mispronouncing that one. Probably. That's India's holiest Hindu city, known as the City of Light, but also the popular American brand of whole grain foods. And a Chinese city, by the way, Kashgar, among other things. I don't know why Kashi refers to things that are not actually called Kashi. I mean, if the city is called Varanasi, there's an explanation for it. Billions of people know it, but I don't. But I just found that kind of interesting. And, it's AI. It doesn't know it's being insulting, but it's either Hindu's holiest city or a breakfast cereal. or maybe both. I do not know. I just found that kind of interesting. Anyway, why did we say Kalshi in the first place? Because we were talking about the FIFA Peace Prize, which is dumb and terrible on its face, and made all the more dumb and terrible by the fact that, one, there is a place called Kalshi and they do what they do. Two, that they're bothering to try to predict whether or not Donald Trump will win the award. And three, CNN is saying, hey, here's a source of information on this stupid award, Kalshi, which I think actually is happening because I think Kalshi, I think I read somewhere that Kalshi might be entering into a partnership of some kind with CNN. And CNN is like did I make this up? I hope I did. But they're regularly going to now be saying things like, well, here's what a bunch of degenerate Bitcoin drug addict gamblers, I guess, are saying about this. Terrific. This is really good. Why have experts who analyze things in world affairs on to explain them? And that is because they are nerdy and they make things difficult to understand. Whereas Kalshi, for some reason, this breakfast cereal has got a betting site. Anyway, the point is the puffed rice says Trump is going to win. And somebody got $1 billion for that. Tariq Mansour is his name. If you're hungry, go eat them, I guess. Eat the rich. Anyway, back over to FIFA. Kalshi says this thing. Who cares? I don't know. CNN is putting it in their stories for some reason. Why are human rights groups concerned is the next question. And in this context, they are asking, why are human rights groups concerned that he's getting this FIFA Peace Prize? And I think the answer is the first hour of the show, he's blowing up some of the most avid soccer players in the world with, no consequences. And that's not very peaceful at all. Several human rights groups are concerned that Infantino is cozying up to Trump at the expense of political neutrality, which, is I think the position they would prefer that FIFA be taking. Advocacy group Fair Square, told CNN Sports, Fair Square gets quoted as many times as Kalshi here. Fair Square told CNN Sports that the introduction of the prize, quote, is just the latest example of serious misgovernance at FIFA and further proof that the organization urgently needs to be reformed. Fair Square director Nick McGeehan added Gianni Infantino's decision to hitch FIFA to Trump's MAGA project, FIFA MAGA, might make short-term commercial sense for FIFA, but is obviously very harmful to the integrity and reputation of the game, which is often played by people as opposed to giant organizations. In a news conference on Wednesday, Human Rights Watch, HRW, Director of Global Initiatives Minky Worden, W-O-R-D-N, Minky, said her organization had reached out to FIFA to better understand the process behind how the prize is decided. We do not have an answer to that, which you could infer that there is no process. There are no other nominees. There was no judging, she said. But clearly, I don't think they're really all that interested in what the process is, just establishing that there was none and that it's also dumb to do this. CNN Sports has reached out to FIFA regarding the process of deciding the Peace Prize, but has yet to receive a response. What if the answer is we're going to let Kalshi decide? I don't know. So then it's not a predictive market at all. It's just manipulative, which may be true. Anyway, what does FIFA say? In November, FIFA responded to queries from CNN regarding Infantino's relationship with Trump amid concerns from human rights groups that it became too close for comfort, or it has become. The global soccer governing body told CNN that it's part of the role of its president to maintain good relationships with the leaders of co-host nations. That's probably true. Since the awarding of the United States bid for Canada, Mexico, and the United States to host the FIFA World Cup in 2026, the FIFA president has enjoyed a strong relationship with President Trump, along with leaders of fellow co-hosts Canada and Mexico, but they're not in the running for the award, apparently. They should be getting it, right? We have a huge warmonger on our borders, but we're doing everything we can not to have a war with them. You win the Peace Prize. No, the Peace Prize goes to the guy who's trying to start wars with the other two. Sure. This has resulted in a close... do you need to know the rest of this garbage? Probably not. Okay, there you go. It's happening today. It may already have happened. Who knows? Kalshi is another story. Keep that in your radar. we got to move on because the international order collapsed while we were sleeping. And here's how I know. Let me see. Where did I start with this? I saw Ann Applebaum post on Blue Sky. I didn't see Ann. I saw a little picture of her. She posted this on Blue Sky, and I think this might have been the first thing I think I saw something about it earlier, and I didn't quite grasp what was going on because it's international affairs, and it's just not my first focus. But she is reacting to European internationalists, let's say, reacting to the White House's publication of a new national security, international affairs policy document. And I don't know what the hell they call it, but we will look it up and tell you. Anne is responding to Ulrich Frank, who is, like I said, an internationalist of some kind or another. Let me look at the bio here. Senior fellow at European Council on Foreign Relations. Okay. A PhD from Oxford, clearly, is going to be in the offing if you're talking about such a person. And she's written a thread about this thing, which is the National Security Strategy of the United States of America, like an actual document by that title, normally published by a White House. And it usually says things like, we are against international terrorism and authoritarianism and pro-democracy, and we love our allies, and we're going to do everything we can to bring peace to the world. But now says white power instead, which is unusual. But Ulrich has a few thoughts on this whole thing, which she includes in a thread, but her second tweet of the thread, post of the thread, because it's on Blue Sky, says the headline, well, let me see, what's she reacting to here? The headline of the story about this thing, the main takeaway from a European point of view of this new national security strategy is this: the transatlantic relationship as we know it is over. That's a startling thing to wake up to on a Friday. It's a news dump day. Yes, we kind of knew this, but this is now official U.S. White House policy. It's not a speech. Oh, it's just Trump being Trump. It's not a statement. Oh, it's just Caroline Leavitt saying that Trump's speech didn't mean anything. This is a publication of the White House. The West, as it used to be, no longer exists. What an exciting prospect for Russia. What could be better, right? This is essentially a statement that the United States is now, I guess, opposed to the European integration project. It is a white supremacist, racist regime. You'll get to that by reading the actual details of the thing. But the top line thing of it is we are no longer not only going to participate in European integration, but we're going to oppose it, and we're going to back policies to disintegrate the integration of Europe. No one could be happier about it than Russia. And I guess yesterday when we were puzzling over, what's with these negotiations falling apart and this big embarrassment for Trump? Like, what happened here? How is it? We were scratching our heads about why this would happen. Why would? We didn't know. We had no good guess. And it was maybe because we didn't understand the kind of manipulation that was going on. And we did. But we were wondering, why would Russia, in the context of the Ukraine war, the Russia-Ukraine war, float a peace plan document that was 100% their greatest wish list ever? And then I understand why they would float that. I even understand why they would hand it over to the United States and say, we want you to say you wrote it. I understand that part. What I didn't understand was why then, heading to the quote unquote negotiating table, the word was that Putin turned around and left the negotiating table. He rejected the wish list in the negotiations and embarrassed the Trump administration in so doing. I don't think that's possible, but that was the wording. And why would they reject their own wish list? This doesn't make sense. But again, it was just beyond our understanding at the moment. And I'm trying to remember, what was it that we called this thing? And I remember Scott looked it up and he sent me the thing. And you don't have to do it again, Scott. I'm going to look. Reflexive control. Still a little unclear on this thing, but okay. So there's this new terminology. Maybe that's why we're confused. But now I'm wondering, so why would they make a wish list, hand it to us, tell us to tell everybody that we wrote it? They wanted their fingerprints not on it. But then when they're surprised, the United States would like Russia to have everything it wants and Ukraine to have nothing that it wants. How do you feel about that, Russia? You would think Russia would say, this is great. I can't believe it's Transylvanian again. Well, anyway, this is great. I can't believe you would come up with this list, but I'm so glad that you did, because if we had done it, everybody would have looked at us side eye. But you did, and you're the United States, and we're Russia. So you couldn't have just done that because you love Russia, because you're the United States. That's the disguise you've been wearing all this. Oh, well, it's been true for 80, 100 years. And so now we know no one would suspect. No one suspects either the Spanish Inquisition or the United States just being in political union with Russia to own the globalists. Who told you that? I mean, I may be wrong about that, but whatever. But what if the idea was, we'll float this, you put your name on it, we'll say he's a big surprise, but then why reject it? What if it's not that I don't like the list, it's that I want more. And what if the more is, I also want you to print this essentially Russian propaganda document as the new United States national security strategy. And then we can talk about my accepting the wish list I gave you to present to me. Maybe. I mean, I have no reason to believe that they're connected, but that's an even bigger win than the wish list. If Putin can write the national security strategy for the United States of America and the White House will publish it, that's the win, right? I think so, right? And that's the political union with Russia to own the globalists. Ulrich doesn't have, I don't know if I need to read the rest of her thread, but she takes some screenshots of the document, and these look to be the pages and the highlights that are passed around most often. So, right. She writes, just what we said. The transatlantic alliance is over. The West, as it used to be, no longer exists. I'll go through it in order. But what all Europeans need to read are pages 25 through 27 on, quote, promoting European greatness. Oh, well, that's worrisome. It sounds good. But when they say greatness, you, of course, have to realize that comes in the context of MAGA. Make America great again. This is how they think they can make Europe great again. And the answer is by breaking it into pieces and making all the pieces racist. But first, she says, this is really a strategy which prioritizes. They also say so openly and definitely have a point on this. She then, and she's pointing to these pages here under this section right up at the beginning. Page 1, introduction. What is American strategy? 1, how American strategy, quote unquote strategy, went astray. So I guess this is the beginning of the document. To ensure that America remains the world's strongest, richest, most powerful, and most successful country for decades to come, it's our document, our country needs a coherent, focused strategy for how we interact with the world. And to get that right, all Americans need to know what exactly it is we are trying to do and why. A strategy is a concrete, realistic plan that explains the essential connection between ends and means. That's in italics there. It begins from an accurate assessment of what is desired and what tools are available or can realistically be created to achieve the desired outcome. That's a good explanation, but what follows is horrible. Anyway, the very next part is highlighted in this screen grab. A strategy must evaluate, sort, and prioritize. Not every country, region, issue, or cause, however worthy, can be the focus of American strategy. The purpose of foreign policy is the protection of core national interests. That is the sole focus of this strategy. American strategies since the end of the Cold War have fallen short. They have been laundry lists or wishes. Oh, we hate those. Or desired end states. Have not clearly defined what we want, but instead stated vague platitudes and have often misjudged what we should want. That's an interesting introduction. That's the highlighted part of page 1. Then it skips to page 8, where we highlight under focused definition of national interest. Since at least the end of the Cold War, administrations have often published national security strategies that seek to expand the definition of America's, quote, national interest, such that almost no issue or endeavor is considered outside its scope. But to focus on everything is to focus on nothing. Well, there is a bit of a point to that. And then skipping ahead to another page, I can't see the page number here. It has become customary for documents such as this to mention every part of the world and issue on the assumption that any oversight signifies a blind spot or a snub. As a result, such documents become bloated and unfocused, the opposite of what a strategy should be. So interesting, arguably a point to be made there, but it is a departure from usual practice. Ulrich then continues and says, I'm also going to say something that will be controversial here. This is actually a very accessible and easy to read document. Is it good prose? No, but it also doesn't do jargon. It might be written by AI, as some have suggested, but for a normal person, this is much clearer than past strategies. It's a good idea to do this non-jargony. It would be a big job to translate one of the old strategies that touches on everything into common parlance. But that might be part of the reason why now national strategy doesn't have to include everything. Anyway, just compare the table of contents, Ulrich says, from the 2025 strategy to the 2022 national security strategy. Prioritization and easy language. Honestly, our strategies could use more of that. This is a point about form, though, not content. She puts them side by side, and you can see that it's much simpler. Let's look at the priorities. Okay, I guess this is where things start to go south. The affairs of other countries are our concern. This is a quote from the piece here. Only if their activities directly threaten our interests. There's no, proactive cooperation to be had out there. 2, focus on Western Hemisphere. 3, they're not numbered here, but bullet points. Nations should prioritize their interests. And lastly, quote, days of the United States propping up the entire world order like Atlas are over. I know another country who would write it that way too. And, we've been hinting at this for a long time. And then domestically, she grabs this page from the priorities part here. The era of mass migration is over. And here's how they put it. Ready? Who a country admits into its borders, in what numbers, and from where, will inevitably define the future of that nation. Any country that considers itself sovereign has the right and duty to define its future. Throughout history, sovereign nations prohibited uncontrolled migration and granted citizenship only rarely to foreigners who also had to meet demanding criteria. The West's experience over the past decades vindicates this enduring wisdom. In countries throughout the world, mass migration has strained domestic resources, increased violence and other crime, weakened social cohesion, distorted labor markets, and undermined national security. The era of mass migration must end. Border security is the primary element of national security. We must protect our country from invasion, not just from unchecked migration, but from cross-border threats such as, everything. And everything is terrorism, drugs, espionage, and human trafficking. A border controlled by the will of the American people, as implemented by their government, is fundamental to the survival of the United States as a sovereign republic. Okay. White power, everybody. So, all right. This is a big departure from the usual here. And Anne Applebaum's interest in this is pointing up that this is the European reaction to the new American national security document, and that it's worrisome, and that there are several examples like this, some of which are in fact also parked here in Instapaper. Let me grab up another one that I can. Well, I guess we're bumped up against the break here, but maybe after the break we'll head into the views presented by another we'll say internationalist Armida van Rij. That's Van Rij in the, I guess, Dutch pronunciation. So I think we've actually got that one. R-I-J. V-A-N, of course, Van Rij. And Armida, I hope, or it's not, maybe Armida, I'm not really not sure. I didn't check that part. Van Rij, senior research fellow at the Center for European, I got to open it up in order to get it. Center for European Reform, okay? And, one of those international experts having a look at some of the more controversial parts of our supposedly new national security strategy. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Alrighty, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So some serious things going on here. Nice bio page for Armida van Rij here at the Centre, you know how they spell it over there, Center for European Reform. Not an organization I'm familiar with, but by all indications, a relatively traditional internationalist view being offered here. And what she's got for us here is a read through of some of the scarier, I guess, parts of this. She says the new U.S. national security strategy, which really has Stephen Miller all over it, right? If you can't tell whether it was artificial intelligence or Miller intelligence, well, what does that tell you? The new U.S. national security strategy makes for scary reading. I wrote about how the U.S. wants to support forces in Europe to tear itself apart back in November of 2024, and I think she's linking to it here, and last May. This NSS, National Security Strategy, confirms that's exactly the U.S. objective for Europe. Gee whiz, Brexit, etc. Backing weirdo nationalists, Orban, far right in everywhere, essentially, France, Netherlands, anywhere that they can. The Alternative for Deutschland, AFD party, etc. All right, so this is, I guess this is what I had in mind when I saw that there were all these screen grabs with highlights being sent around about this national security document. It's Armida van Rij's version of it that I was actually, I think, most interested in. But it was a good point to read Ulrich's point. Like, simplifying things is a wise idea. This, on page 25, and I think that was also what Ulrich was saying, the scary stuff is on pages 25 to 29 or 27 to 29. First, promoting European greatness. That sounds familiar. Should I read you the whole thing or just the highlighted bits? Well, I'll tell you what's highlighted. It's a page, though. Plus, that's just one screenshot. American officials have become used to thinking about European problems in terms of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. That was actually Trump telling us to do that, too, by the way. There is truth to this, but Europe's real problems are even deeper. Oh, okay. So what's happening here is, Trump is saying, yargle bargle, military spending, they're not doing enough, pay up to NATO, economic stagnation. But Miller wants him to say, don't let brown people into Europe because Europe is for whiteys. European, identity Europa. You got it. So the real problems are even deeper. Anyway, back to the actual document. Continental Europe has been losing share of global GDP, down from 25% in 1990 to 14% today, partly owing to national and transnational regulations that undermine creativity and industriousness. Now a highlighted part. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure. That does sound like Stephen Miller, doesn't it? Or possibly Steve Bannon, but when they're in the same mode. The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent. Oh, that probably deserves, horror dramatic music. Yes. Migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife. I mean, by the way, constant arc of history, but whatever. Censorship of free speech, you know what that means, not letting Nazis have rallies, and suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, and loss of national identities and self-confidence. Isn't that really what it's all about? Now back into the unhighlighted part, though. Should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. That is a very familiar construction, too. Iran will have the bomb in how many now? Yeah, the 5 years, by the way. Iran will have the bomb in 5 years. 5 years is up. Does Iran have the bomb? They don't. Anyway, should such trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. As such, it is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and militaries strong enough to remain reliable allies. Oh, they will if they integrate, but we've got to stop that too. So why? Who would want that to happen? Russia. Anyway, many of these nations are currently doubling down on their present path. We want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilizational self-confidence, and to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. Why, by the way, is a question not apparently answered, at least not so far. It's a very long document. Maybe the why is in there, and they may even have gotten it right. But that was highlighted there too. We want Europe to remain European, regain its civilizational self-confidence. What the was that? And to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. I mean, it's just the whole post-war integration project that has prevented, for coming on 100 years, continent-wide conflagration, which is a good stretch for not having that happen. This lack of self-confidence is most evident in Europe's relationship with what country? What country? Anybody? That's right. You got it right. Russia. European allies enjoy a significant hard power advantage over Russia by almost every measure, save nuclear weapons. As a result of Russia's war in Ukraine, European relations with Russia are now deeply attenuated. And many Europeans regard Russia as an existential threat. Well, now highlighted. Managing European relations with Russia will require significant U.S. diplomatic engagement. We'll handle this, folks. Both to reestablish conditions of strategic stability across the Eurasian landmass and to mitigate the risk of conflict between Russia and European states. We'll handle it from here, boys. All you have to do is allow us to tell them you've surrendered. Then there'll be peace. Now, back out of the highlighting. For the rest of page 25, it is a core interest of the United States to negotiate an expeditious cessation of hostilities in Ukraine in order to stabilize European economies. That's why we're giving away Ukraine. Prevent unintended escalation or expansion of the war and reestablish strategic stability with Russia, as well as to enable the post-hostilities reconstruction of Ukraine to enable its survival as a viable state. That sounds like a throwaway promise to them, but whatever. Why, though, do we have to reestablish strategic stability with Russia, and how come the way to do it is to give them Ukraine? I am just not clear on that. And the answer is, shut up or we'll have you arrested. The document continues on the next page, unhighlighted here, though. The Ukraine war has had the perverse effect of increasing Europe's, especially Germany's, external dependencies. Today, German chemical companies are building some of the world's largest processing plants in China using Russian gas that they cannot obtain at home. The Trump administration finds itself at odds with European officials who hold unrealistic expectations for the war, perched in unstable minority governments, like the one we have here, many of which trample on the basic principles of democracy to suppress opposition, which we have here. A large European majority wants peace, yet that desire is not translated into policy, in large measure because of those governments' subversion of democratic processes. Like here. This is strategically important to the United States precisely because European states cannot reform themselves if they are trapped in political crisis. Let's gerrymander every state immediately. Yet Europe remains strategically and culturally vital to the United States. Transatlantic trade remains one of the pillars of the global economy and of American prosperity. European sectors from manufacturing to technology to energy remain among the world's most robust. Europe is home to cutting-edge scientific research and world-leading cultural institutions. Not only can we not afford to write Europe off, though we tried, doing so would be self-defeating for what this strategy aims to achieve. American diplomacy should continue to stand up for genuine democracy, even here, freedom of expression and unapologetic celebrations of European nations' individual character and history, highlighted. America encourages its political allies in Europe to promote this revival of spirit and the growing influence of patriotic European parties. Indeed, gives cause for great optimism. Oh my. Our goal, unhighlighted, should be to help Europe correct its current trajectory. We'll handle Europe for you guys. We will need a strong Europe to help us successfully compete and to work in concert with us to prevent any adversary from dominating Europe, unless it's Russia. America is understandably sentimentally attached to the European continent, and of course to Britain and Ireland. Not the rest of you losers. The character of these countries is also strategically important because we count upon creative, capable, confident, democratic allies, to establish conditions of stability and security. We want to work with aligned countries that want to restore their former greatness. And then now on to another page, presumably page 27, in which we have, over the long term, it is more than plausible that within a few decades at the latest, certain NATO members will become majority non-European. Oh no. Dramatic music, please. As such, it is an open question whether they will view their place in the world or their alliance with the United States in the same way as those who signed the NATO Charter. So it's not, it's not you, it's me. Well, it's not us, actually, it is you. We want out of this NATO relationship. You left us. You abandoned us, right? I didn't abandon the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party abandoned me. We didn't abandon NATO. NATO became non-North Atlantic. So we left. We can't have an alliance with brown people occupying this area. It has to be white or else it's invalid. Like we have treaty organizations with all sorts of countries all over the world. Why it can't work here, I don't know. They're participating in the politics of those countries, running for and holding office, but our racists are upset about that. Now, it goes on to say, where there's some highlighting, our broad policy for Europe should prioritize. There's some bullet points, because we love bullets. And I'll tell you which ones are highlighted, but this one isn't. Reestablishing conditions of stability within Europe and strategic stability with Russia. Next, enabling Europe to stand on its own feet and operate as a group of aligned sovereign nations, as opposed to an integrated whole, I guess, including by taking primary responsibility for its own defense without being dominated by any adversarial power, i.e. abandoned to that other adversarial power, Russia, but they say they totally won't do it, and we believe them, I guess. The third bullet point is highlighted, cultivating resistance to Europe's current trajectory within European nations. Not 100% sure what that means. That's very broad, but certainly it's anti-integrationist. Next bullet point, opening European markets to U.S. goods and services and ensuring fair treatment of U.S. workers and businesses. We're usually interested in that. Next, building up healthy nations of Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe through commercial ties, weapons sales, political collaboration, and cultural and educational exchanges. Then highlighted here, the next one is ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. That sounds like Mr. Putin may have written it himself. And lastly, non-highlighted, encourage Europe to take action to combat mercantilist overcapacity. What happened to getting rid of jargon? Technological theft, cyber espionage, and other hostile economic practices. It's interesting, to say the least. And this is all what Armida Van Rij highlighted in saying the new U.S. national security strategy makes for scary reading, and she's written about it in the past, and some of the links are here. The November 2024 piece that she mentioned, which argues that the alignment between MAGA and some members of the European far right threatens the European project. Yeah, well, which European project is that? The European Union. Of course, this is that piece published at chathamhouse.org. Trump and his growing number of European allies threaten the European project. She gets right to it. We don't have time to read through the entirety of that piece, but perhaps you would like to. A deeper dive, she offers next, into the ties between Silicon Valley libertarians, MAGA, U.S. big tech, and the European far right, and what it means for European security and how the EU should respond. Hint, the answer is not to deregulate tech. The title of that piece, published over at ICDS.ee, ICDS, International Center for Defense and Security. And that piece is titled Trump, Silicon Valley, and Europe's Far Right, International... Oh, well, okay, that's about it. And published by, again, International Center for Defense and Security. So, there's a lot to chew on here. I'm not going to be able to analyze it any further other than to say this is very worrisome that this Friday morning begins with internationalist experts and European analysts and experts saying this is a formal declaration of the end of the transatlantic alliance. Again, I thought the important part, it's not an offhand blurting out of garbage from dementia-addled Trump. It's not the White House defending his babbling, whether on the plane or on Truth Social. It is a thoroughly vetted and lengthy publication by the White House of a new national security strategy, and it is white nationalist garbage, and we're stuck with it. That's the official document, and I guess you're going to have to look for reaction over the weekend and into next week from European capitals as being, yeah, we don't have allies in America anymore. Hopefully someone kept copies of the old documents. I saw that Ulrich was comparing the table of contents. I hope you kept the other one. Keep it safe because we might need it back again later if we can shed this government at any point in the future. So, scary bit. Just thought I would add that to your worries for the weekend, something for us to think about. Now, what about a couple of other smaller bore stories? I told you that there were some other things to consider. There are Kash Patel doing more dumb things. We learned last week, again, in passing, we never really read the full thing. It's going to do the same thing here, essentially, but we heard that he's, let's say, misappropriating the assets of the FBI that he's been left in charge with, in addition to flying around on an official jet aircraft to visit his girlfriend wherever she is traveling because she's an aspiring country singer. He then assigned a FBI SWAT team to guard her, like physically. She's got a bodyguard contingent of FBI SWAT teams. But in addition to guarding her, they also, I guess, maybe pick up the dry cleaning and do the instant cart run or something like that. Because the new news here from MS Now is whatever the MSNBC network became. Kash Patel ordered FBI detail to give girlfriend's pal a lift home, according to various sources. Hey, the FBI director's use of resources is under intense scrutiny as he insists he is, quote, a steward of the taxpayer dollars. After a fashion, sure. Ken Delaney and Carol Leonig, who you know as being NBC assets, now at MS Now. Maybe they were writing at MSNBC before. Serious folks. I'll give you a taste of what's going on here. FBI Director Kash Patel has, on more than one occasion, ordered that the security detail protecting his girlfriend escort one of her allegedly inebriated friends home after a night of partying in Nashville, according to 3 people with knowledge of the incidents. And wasn't Nashville going to become one of the targets of an ICE invasion? And I guess Kash Patel figured, oh, well, while I'm there visiting my girlfriend, I can oversee snatching people off the street. But pretty soon it's going to be a zero crime place, and then there'll be less excuse for escorting people home. I guess you could argue, well, look, I'm here. I'm visiting. This woman's drunk. It would be, irresponsible to let her go home on her own. But I mean, there's also call her an Uber versus send an FBI SWAT team with her. But that's what you have on hand. I mean, I guess you could make a case about that, but let's not make this a regular practice, Kash. Patel's girlfriend, Alexis Wilkins, asked FBI agents on her security team at least 2 times, including once this spring, to drive her friend home, and agents objected to diverting from their assignment and said the sources, who were granted anonymity to discuss non-public matters because they were afraid to be firebombed. But Patel insisted they do as Wilkins requested, and in one case called the leader of Wilkins' security detail and yelled at him to do so he wasn't even there. I think that's pretty interesting. News of the effort to deploy agents to provide security for a private citizen has spread through the Bureau and beyond, as agents have grown increasingly concerned by Patel's use of the Bureau's strapped resources, the people said. FBI spokesperson Ben Williamson broadly disputed that such events took place. This is made up and did not happen. At Patel's direction, the FBI provides a separate security detail for Wilkins, 27, a country music performer, who lives part-time in Nashville for her work. The FBI security detail, first reported by MS Now, is made up of members of an elite SWAT team based in the area. It has spurred concern about Patel abusing FBI resources and essentially drive his girlfriend around for various events and appointments. The use of FBI resources to drive her around. You got the point. The FBI has never before provided a separate security detail for a director's girlfriend. Spouses of past directors typically received episodic security protection, but only when they were traveling with their spouse and the director's detail. Former FBI agents and senior law enforcement officials said it was already disturbing that Patel had pulled elite tactical agents away from their SWAT mission to drive his girlfriend around town. But they told MS Now they were shocked that the director instructed tactical agents to use their time on yet another person the FBI had no reasonable duty to protect. You get the idea? I don't think we need to sort through the whole thing, although I'm sure it's very revealing and interesting. I just wanted to put that on your radar the way we did the first time with the SWAT team. I got to give you this. Corey Mills cannot stay out of trouble, and I guess recognizes no limits on the scale of the sorts of trouble he can involve himself in. I have to turn to Raw Story on this one, but apparently they're based off of, well, you'll see. But let me give you the headline, and then you can find out where they're getting their information. It might have been interesting to read it in the primary source, but Raw Story has got it covered, I think, and maybe you can sum it up quicker. Scandal-mired Republican, you know who that is, Corey Mills, illegally shipped arms to foreign governments while in Congress, according to reports here. Matthew Chapman is covering this for Raw Story. I knew about him, beating up his girlfriend. I knew about him not paying his rent, having multiple girlfriends come and visit him, various other infractions along the way. Now he's an international arms dealer while he's a member of Congress. Okay. I mean, in the sense that it is not okay. A scandal-plagued Republican congressman, one of many, was illegally running an arms export business to foreign countries while serving in the House of Representatives. Problem, and then problem on top of problem. Reporter Roger Sollenberger revealed in an investigative Substack post. Sollenberger does good stuff. I'd like to read it. And his company that is to say, Mills's company, that he used to do so, was run into the ground and is now in foreclosure, which, is not a scandal per se in itself. But I mean, again, like Donald Trump going bankrupt with casinos, Corey Mills is going bankrupt with arms sales. I mean, good. He's not supposed to be doing this ever, anywhere, for anybody, and not while a member of Congress. But he couldn't even make a go of it, which is astonishing, I think, all by itself. Corey Mills has faced a series of other allegations and controversies this year, to say the least, including physical abuse claims from a woman he was involved with, an eviction from his D.C. penthouse after defaulting an $85,000 in rent, because I guess he wasn't getting paid for the guns, an ongoing congressional ethics investigation into unprofessional conduct, like going bankrupt as an arms dealer. That's very unprofessional. Stolen valor, I almost forgot about that one, and failure to disclose gifts, and accusations that he hired sex workers during a 2021 trip to Afghanistan. Well, this new controversy involves PACEM, P-A-C-E-M, it's all capitals here. I don't know if it stands for anything, but of course it's also Latin for peace, which is a gun-running name. Sure, fantastic, excellent. A security contracting company that Mills and his wife co-founded in 2014. I mean, his wife might need guns, but whatever. Congressional inquiry into Mills involves roughly $2 million in personal loans, quote-unquote personal loans, Mills gave his 2022 congressional campaign, noted Sullenberger. But according to legal experts in a review of court records, campaign filings, and personal and corporate financial statements, these personal funds appear more likely tied to a different source. Tens of millions of dollars in corporate loans Mills secured from a foreign lender to bail out his moribund weapons dealing business. What? Why? The amount of PACEM's debt is existential. Everything's existential these days. Today, PACEM owes a whopping $66 million, according to recent court filings. That's anywhere between 6 and 33 times what Mills' disclosures say the company is worth, wrote Sullenberger. Making matters worse, Mills, who serves on the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees, has never disclosed any of this debt on his ethics forms, despite the fact that since 2019 he has been personally liable for that debt, requiring it to be disclosed. But, I mean, a member of Congress who's on the Armed Services Committee and Foreign Affairs Committee is an international arms dealer, and bad one at that. Over the summer, 9 Point Partners, 9 Point being one word here, 9 Points, one word, Partners, a second word, a Canadian asset management firm that serves as PACEM's lender, terminated their debt fund and moved to foreclose on PACEM's factory. This is a security consulting firm with a factory, but they're arms dealers, so they're not really security consultants. Even further complicating all of this, PACEM was not just a federal contractor, but also exporting arms to foreign governments. No one even mentioned that it had a domestic business. Exporting arms to foreign governments, no they're not, I guess, including Ukraine, as it fights to defend itself from Russian invasion. That's an odd position for a MAGA wacko to be in. Legal and industry experts, citing federal statutes, told me that as with PACEM's government contracts, Mills' ownership means those exports are likely illegal in the first place, said the report. So many things that are illegal in the first place today. Sullenberger, who has conducted a 9-month investigation into Mills, has promised more revelations about the embattled congressman are coming. So I got to start keeping an eye on Sullenberger's Substack. I don't love looking at Substacks, but thanks to Matthew Chapman and Ross Story for bringing that one to our attention. Seems like something you ought to know about. Wasn't probably necessary for the weekend, but the continuing saga of Corey Mills is unbelievable. What's really unbelievable is how much unethical conduct he's involved in and still not actually getting any money out of it. Although I don't know how he's living in an $85,000 penthouse apartment and keeping girlfriends, et cetera, 60-something million dollars in the hole with a gun running operation while serving in Congress. What is happening? And also, again, why do I get up in the morning? It's really difficult to know why any of us go to work. Well, all of this nonsense, of course, tax advantaged for him in the middle of all this stuff, too. All right. One more thing I have to tell you about before we play the music. We've watched this story develop. We're now at like the next stage in the Trump ballroom saga. Washington Post reports under the headline, Trump hires new White House ballroom architect. We knew he was fighting with the old one, but he was staying on in an advisory capacity, but I guess he's not. So I have the full confidence in my architect. He's fired. You know, the usual thing. Although the president and the original architect had clashed over the size of the project, the decisive factor, the subheader says, was the small firm's limited capacity to handle such an enormous project, which is why you don't hire them for it in the first place. But it's an amazing thing. Well, we're basically saying, I bring in the best people. Oh, no, actually, I brought in not only the worst people, but the wrong kind of people to begin with. Jonathan Edwards and Dan Diamond report this stuff. I'll give you the lead paragraph and then cut out for the day and, in fact, for the weekend. President Donald Trump, surprise, he's the president, has replaced the architect he handpicked to design his White House ballroom, according to 3 people familiar with the project who don't want their homes bombed, ending the involvement of a boutique firm whose selection raised questions from the start about whether it had the capacity to complete the massive high-profile endeavor. I don't know. They seemed pretty confident in them before. This seems like part of the story being planted here. Well, we're firing them because they were the wrong type of firm. You chose them. For more than 3 months, James McCreary and his namesake architecture firm led the effort to design Trump's $300 million ballroom building until late October, when he stopped working on the project. One of the people said, it's unclear whether he stepped back voluntarily, but the men parted on good terms. I'm sure. Right, sure. It says they remain in good terms as well. I'll tell you what's a good term. Leaving for the weekend.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, you'll need to stay tuned now for Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and I'll tell you why. Right at the top, the first topic of discussion here, Ukrainian President Zelensky has blasted Trump's ultimate betrayal. That's a quote, after avoiding an assassination attempt ordered by Putin over Ireland. I didn't even get to this. They tried to take his plane down. Stay tuned. You have to.